What a tragedy. This car caught in a flash flood out in Barstow, California. Inside was a dad and his 2-year-old son. They got separated. Dad survived, but the 2-year-old son did not. And now it has turned into a criminal case. Take a look at this from the Barstow Police Department on Thursday, September 18th. Approximately 7:14, the Barstow Police Department and Fire District were dispatched to the area of West Main Street regarding reports of a vehicle that had been swept away by floodwaters. Responding units determined that the vehicle had been carried into a wash north of West Main Street. As the vehicle was overtaken by the floodwaters, the driver, 26-year-old Brandon Padilla Aguilera, and his 2-year-old son, Xavier Padilla Aguilera, exited the vehicle but were ultimately separated from each other. Numerous emergency responders assisted in conducting an extensive search. Unfortunately, Xavier was located deceased on the 19th. Now, due to the severity of the incident, the Barstow Police Detective Division started investigating. Over the course of a month-long investigation, they spoke with witnesses and gathered evidence. Based on the evidence, detectives secured an arrest warrant for him. Then on October 17th at 12:30, detectives arrested Brandon Padilla Aguilera at his residence without incident. He was booked into the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department on charges of murder. Well, then the DA's office got the case and they downgraded things to vehicular manslaughter with gross negligence, child abuse, endangerment under circumstances or conditions likely to cause a great bodily injury or death. This count includes a special allegation of willful harm and injury resulting in death. Okay, I'm looking at this situation myself and I'm wondering, there's got to be more to this. If it's just a guy with an error in judgment in driving somewhere he shouldn't have, and an error in judgment in thinking he could take his son out of the car and get out of this situation, that's a tragedy. That's an error in judgment. That's not a crime. But is there more? I would think there'd have to be more, whether it's someone specifically telling him not to do it or him purposely throwing his son into the floodwaters to save himself. I don't know. Let's bring back in the think tank. Josh Colesrud, Claudia King, Holland Reed. Holland, does this sound like a crime to you, or do you need to hear more?
Vinny, I'm going with you on this. I need to hear more because my first heartstring goes to, it was an accident. It was a tragedy. If you're all parents, I'm a parent. I've made mistakes one time where I thought I was going to be arrested because my son ran off and they considered it neglect. And that was back when he was 2 and 3 years old, very rambunctious. But there was no crime committed, so to speak, and nothing happened to my child. But I have such a sympathy and empathy for that because I don't feel like this is the whole story. It feels like something else had to have happened for that level of a charge to come his way. As you said, he left him there. He left him in the car while he tried to do something else. It doesn't really quite make sense, especially looking at the pictures, which seems a little disturbing. Why would anybody drive or even attempt to drive in that level of water with hopefully your child in the back seat where they're supposed to be? It does not make any sense to me.
Who's up?
Yeah, I have to piggyback on that. I like what Holland had to say, and I would like to add that this type of case reminds me of the drownings that we often see here in Arizona, where a father would leave a gate open and then their 2-year-old son would crawl in the pool, and 5 minutes later the son is dead, and the father is then charged with manslaughter. This is very similar to that type of case, and law enforcement has to be really careful with prosecuting tragedy because ultimately you want the charges to deter conduct. And if the majority of people in that situation may not know what they could have done or if it would have been reasonable to go through that water, then it's not a crime. And flooding in that area was uncommon. So this was what we call as lawyers an act of God. And, would everybody react in it differently. You know, playing Monday morning quarterback, yeah, it's easy to say I would never do that. But in the moment, maybe it looked like he could cross it. I mean, who knows?
I just think there's more going on, Vinny, because surely this police department and this DA would not initially charge murder and then change it to manslaughter just because he drove into water he shouldn't have. I'm wondering, was there a sign saying don't go through and he went through? Was he intoxicated? Like, what did they discover in all these interviews and evidence collection that led them to this decision?
Yeah, there has to be more to the story, because if there isn't, for a father to lose his little boy and know that he was responsible, to me, that is punishment. That is a life sentence right there. And the question is, what would the more be? And the thing, Holland, here is that they did do a months-long investigation. They did speak with witnesses. So at this point, I guess we'll have to find out when they head to the courtroom and we start to hear more of the facts come out. I don't want to prejudge it one way or the other, but I'm always tentative when we criminalize accidents. When we criminalize accidents, to me, it takes a little bit more. We can't have this melding of civil liability with criminal liability, and even in the context of a parent and a child. I'm just hoping that this was a father who wanted to do the best that he could for his son.
I'm going to completely agree with you. It's such a catch-22 when he could have just been, as everyone has said, trying to get his son through this flood and couldn't get the door open or what have you. Or he could have been intoxicated and couldn't get the door open. Or he could have a history of child abuse that we don't know about yet that hasn't come to light. Or there's or. It just feels like it's a tragedy all the way around. This young child has lost his life. This father, who hopefully did not have ill intent, will have his day in court. But nonetheless, it is a catch-22 when we're looking at accidents and criminalizing them, and also punishing them more than people actually who have intent
Get punished.
Get the punishment.
We've seen that. Josh Colesrud, Claudia King, Holland Reed, thank you so much.